The cat knew the rhythm of the house. It creaked the same way every evening, wood settling as the heat from the stove sank into its bones. The air always smelled of hickory smoke, the sour tang of canned beans, and the faint salt of sweat in wool coats hung by the door. Beneath it all, something sweet and living, the scent of the man and the woman who fed her, spoke in their low voices and moved about like slow, careful giants. Her world ended at the walls, mostly. Sometimes the door opened, and she padded out to the porch to watch the woods draw the daylight away. The hollow below the house was always filled with a sound of running water, a creek hiding in the laurel and stone. Beyond that, blackness and trees. The man called it the ridge. The cat only knew it by smell, pine sap, wet earth, and the iron taste of something deep under the ground. Lately, the air had changed. The stove fire burned wrong. The wood hissed like something alive. The man cursed at it and went quiet afterward, sitting long in his chair. The cat didn't understand his words, but she understood the silence that followed them. The way his breath came sharp through his nose, the way the woman would stop sewing and look toward the window when the wind pressed against the glass. Outside, there was something new in the night. Not movement, sound, something listening. She'd felt it first when hunting mice behind the woodpile, a stillness, as if the forest itself were holding its breath. The night birds stopped calling. The creek went quiet. Then came a noise like someone breathing through a cracked throat, far off, but close enough that the fur along her spine lifted. It wasn't a fox. It wasn't a man. It was something that had been in the woods long before both. The next day, the man stacked his shotgun by the door. He muttered to the woman in that slow mountain drawl. The cat only caught pieces, tracks, something big, not right. The woman told him to hush. The cat could smell her fear all the same, thin and sharp like vinegar. That night, snow came early. The air tasted of metal. She curled near the stove and listened to it hiss while the two of them slept. Somewhere beyond the window, something cried once, long and low, and the man sat up so fast the bed frame squealed. He didn't sleep again. The cat drifted near the door and pressed her nose to the crack at the bottom. There, beneath the scent of snow, something else, rot, old fur, and hunger. The next morning, the man found the prints. Big, long. The snow around them melted to slush. He came back pale and quiet, poured coffee, and stared at the hills. When the woman asked him what kind of animal it was, he just shook his head and said, "Ain't one I ever seen." That night, he nailed shut the back door. The cat watched from the counter, tail flicking. Each hammer strike echoed through the boards like a heartbeat. By the time he finished, the forest had gone silent again. The only sound was wind scraping along the tin roof, and once something dragging through the frozen leaves behind the barn. She stayed awake all night. Even after the fire died and the stove went dark, she could see through the window, eyes that weren't eyes, deep in the trees, reflecting a faint red light. They didn't blink. They only waited. When the man stepped out the next morning, the cat pressed herself against the window, tail lashing. He went toward the barn with his gun, moving slowly through the drift. The air was gray and heavy. No birds, no sound. Then came the smell. Iron, wet fur, and something older, like dirt turned up from a grave. He didn't come back for a long time. When he did, his coat was torn. His face was pale and drawn. He said nothing. The woman cried softly at the table. He sat and stared at his hands until dark. That night, the cat heard it again. Closer this time. Not the sound of breathing, but the sound of something learning how to breathe. The days shortened. The stove burned longer, and the man grew quieter. He took to sitting by the window with the gun across his knees, eyes on the tree line. The woman tried to keep to her work, washing, canning, mending, but her hands trembled even when she wasn't cold. The cat knew something in the air had changed again. The house felt smaller. Every sound came sharp and close, as if the world outside had pressed its face against the walls to listen. She could hear the creak of the roof, the soft tick of cooling iron, the woman's shallow breathing in the next room. Even the snow fell different, slow, heavy, muffled, swallowing noise instead of making it. Sometimes at night she'd smell it again. That thick, wrong scent. Not death, not rot. Something older than death, like the breath of stone beneath the earth. When the wind carried it down the chimney, her fur stood on end, and she'd flatten her ears to the sound of it, moving beyond the house, always circling, never stopping. Once, when the man dozed by the fire, she climbed onto the sill and looked out. The forest waited. The dark line of it crouched beyond the field, black and still under the thin moonlight. Then something moved, a shape that was not a shape, tall and shivering, bending as if it were made of branches instead of bone. She blinked, and it was gone. But the smell stayed. The man began leaving lanterns burning through the night, one on the porch, one by the barn, another on the path down to the creek. He muttered as he lit them, words the cat had never heard him say before, half prayer, half curse. The woman didn't ask anymore. She only watched him with eyes gone gray and tired. The nights grew louder in strange ways. Something scraped the barn door. Something brushed against the siding of the house, slow enough that the wood moaned under it. The cat could hear nails or claws, long, careful, testing. The man would rush outside with the gun, shouting into the cold, his voice swallowed by the trees. He always came back shaking, eyes wide, saying there was nothing out there. But there was. The cat knew. She could smell it on him when he came back, faint and sour, clinging to his coat like smoke. The same scent that drifted through the cracks in the floorboards at night. One morning, before dawn, the cat woke to the sound of the woman crying. It wasn't loud. It was the kind of cry that broke between breaths, like she was trying to stay quiet. The man's voice came next, sharp and low. The cat only understood his tone, not the words, but it was filled with something final. He was afraid, and that fear had curdled into anger. He left before sunrise. The sound of the truck faded down the road and didn't come back. The woman waited all day. She lit the stove, poured his coffee, even laid out his gloves on the table. She called his name into the trees once, then shut the door and locked it. By evening, the house felt empty, like the fire couldn't fill it anymore. The cat prowled the rooms, restless. There were sounds now, small ones, wood creaking where no one walked, faint scurrying above the ceiling. Once, a whisper under the floorboards, almost like a voice trying to form. She pressed her ear to the planks and heard breathing, wet, slow, close. She ran to the window and stared into the yard. Snow drifted sideways. The lantern by the barn still burned, its flame trembling in the wind. Beyond it, shapes moved. Not people, not deer. Too tall, too thin. They swayed as if listening to something. The woman came to the window, saw what the cat saw, and stumbled backward, her hand over her mouth. The cat hissed, tail puffed, ready to bolt. But there was nowhere to run. That night, the woman barred the front door with a chair and sat beside the fire with the shotgun. The cat curled on the hearth. Watching hours passed. The flames died down, and with them, the warmth. The woman's head drooped, the gun slipping against her knee. Then came the knock. Soft, almost polite. 3 slow taps against the door. The woman jerked awake, the gun clattering to the floor. The cat's heart hammered. Another knock, louder this time, then a pause, then a voice. "Annie!" The woman froze. The voice came again, cracked and strained. But it was his, the man's voice, calling her name. "Annie, open the door! It's cold out here." But the cat knew it wasn't him. The scent was wrong, thick, decayed, filled with that same stone-deep rot. The voice carried an echo, like it came from something wearing the shape of his throat. The woman stood, trembling, tears running down her face. She whispered his name and took one step towards the door. The cat hissed and yowled, back arched. The woman didn't listen. The handle turned. The wind pushed against the house, and the door creaked open an inch. What came through wasn't a man, not anymore. It bent to fit through the doorway. Its skin hung in folds, white against the dark. The smell hit first, meat left in the sun, cold dirt. The metallic tang of the creek and flood eyes gleamed where eyes shouldn't be, catching the lantern light. And its mouth, wide, jagged, filled with the echo of a scream that hadn't stopped yet. The cat bolted under the table as the woman screamed and fired. The blast filled the room, deafening, smoke thick in the air. The thing didn't fall. It only turned its head toward the sound and moved, slow and sure, across the floor. The woman fired again. Once. Twice. Each shot smaller than the thing's breath. Then the gun clicked empty. The cat couldn't see clearly through the smoke. Only flashes, her skirt pulling away, a hand reaching, the sound of splintering wood, the hiss of blood against the stove. The air filled with the heat of it, with the iron scent so strong it burned her nose. Something heavy fell, then quiet, except for the fire crackling where it had spilled. When the cat crawled out from under the table, the thing was gone. The door stood open. Snow blew in across the floor. The woman lay still by the stove, eyes glassy, her neck a torn red smile. The cat pressed against her hand, mewed once, then ran for the shadows as footsteps moved in the yard outside. Too many, too heavy, too soft. The cat hid in the crawl space beneath the house until morning. The wind never stopped. Neither did the footsteps. The cat stayed beneath the house while the world above froze. At first there were only the usual sounds, wind between the boards, snow slipping from the eaves, the slow drip of water from the pipes. Then came others, soft, wet sounds, weight shifting on the floorboards, something dragging. A voice, low and half-broken, calling the woman's name. The cat pressed herself into the dirt, tail curled tight around her legs. She could smell it moving through the house, old blood, ash, and the rot that came from something not meant to breathe. Every creak in the wood matched her heartbeat. Hours passed, maybe days. Light bled through the cracks in the floor, dim, then gone, then dim again. The cat didn't move except to lick the frost from her whiskers. Once, she heard footsteps outside, heavy ones. Then a voice she almost recognized. The man. He was calling her name, the way he used to when he rattled the food tin. His words came slow, broken by breath that hissed like steam. "Here, girl. Come on now. Ain't gonna hurt you." The cat crept toward the sound, drawn by the tone, by memory. But when his boots came into view through the slats, they weren't boots anymore. They were bare feet, gray with cold, leaving prints that steamed in the snow. She backed away, tail low. Above her, the boards groaned as he moved through the house, step by dragging step. He spoke to the woman like she was still there, his voice breaking into laughter that wasn't laughter at all. When the smell hit her, copper, bile, and that same stone-deep rot, she knew what had come back wasn't the man. Sometime in the black of night, the noises stopped. No footsteps, no breathing. Just the wind again, and the creak of the boards, and the slow whisper of snow. The cat crawled out from the crawl space when the air grew still. The house was dark, except for a faint orange glow from the stove, still burning low. The woman's body had been moved, dragged toward the door, leaving a dark trail on the wood. The gun was gone. The cat moved silently through the room, sniffing. Every surface carried that same heavy scent. It coated the air, sank into the walls. She padded past the overturned chair, past the broken jars and the spill of dried beans across the floor. The door hung open to the cold, snow piled against the threshold. Outside, the world was white and quiet. The lantern by the barn had burned out. The barn doors stood open. She saw prints leading into the trees, long, deep, half human, half something else. Beside them, another set. Bare feet, small. The woman's? No. Too light, too wrong. The forest waited beyond, black against the snow. The cat stared into it for a long time before moving. Hunger drove her. She leapt onto the porch rail, sniffing the wind. It carried that same sour scent, faint now but steady, winding through the hollow. She followed. The woods were not silent anymore. Something whispered among the trees, soft and constant, like leaves rubbing together though the air was still. She moved low to the ground, her fur slicked flat by cold. The prints ahead glowed faintly in the moonlight, pressed deep into the crusted snow. Somewhere far off, she heard the creak again, but it didn't sound right. It gurgled thickly, like it had frozen around something alive. The closer she came, the stronger the smell grew. Iron, smoke, hunger. She found what was left of the man near the water's edge. He was sitting, or something like it, back-bent, hands sunk into the snow as if he'd tried to claw his way down into the earth. His head turned at the sound of her steps. What faced her was almost him. The same eyes, but stretched thin in a face too narrow, skin pale as birch bark, mouth wide and wet with dark blood. It smiled. "There you are," it said, voice grinding like ice against stone. The cat didn't move. The thing's breath came in fogged bursts, each one smelling of rot and river mud. "She's gone. Ain't she, girl?" It waited, tilting its head too far to one side. Then its face twisted. "Hungry, ain't ya?" It offered a hand, if it could still be called that. The fingers were too long, nails black and curved. Bits of skin peeled back where frost had cracked it open. The cat hissed low in her throat, every muscle tensed. The thing laughed, a sound like air escaping from deep underground. Then it leaned forward, and its belly groaned, loud, hollow, like something moving inside it. The cat ran, through snow and brush, under the hanging branches of the pines, across stones slick with ice. The world blurred to sound and smell, her own breath, the hiss of snow, the creak of something massive following close behind. She didn't look back until the hollow opened up ahead, a dip in the land where the creek disappeared beneath the ground. She leapt down into it, scrambling over roots and rock. The air grew warmer, wet, filled with the heavy smell of earth. She could hear it coming, each step deep, patient, unhurried. At the bottom of the hollow there was a hole, a black mouth in the ground, rimmed with old stone and half choked with moss. The scent coming from it was ancient, older than the man, older than the house, older than anything she'd ever known. It smelled of the same thing she'd sensed all along. The source. The creature stopped at the edge above her. Its shadow stretched down into the hollow like a second night. It crouched, bones cracking, eyes catching the faint light. "Don't run," it whispered. "Ain't nowhere left to go." The cat crouched low, ears flat, tail flicking once. The wind shifted. The smell of the hole hit her. Deep earth, stone, and that faint sweetness of decay. The creature hesitated, nostrils flaring. For the first time, it made a sound almost like a growl, not anger but fear. The cat stepped backward into the dark. The ground gave way beneath her paws, soft as old soil, and she fell into the black. When she woke, she was lying on a damp rock. The air was still and heavy, filled with echoes of water dripping. The light that reached down from above was thin and gray. She listened. Nothing moved. No footsteps, no breath. Only the sound of the creek somewhere beyond the stone walls. She followed it. The tunnel opened into a cavern where the earth itself seemed to hum. The walls were slick, marked with shapes older than words. Claws, maybe, or hands, pressed into the rock centuries ago. The air thrummed through her bones like a heartbeat. She could smell every layer of time here. Roots, water, ash, blood, and beneath it all, the same presence she'd felt for days, the old hunger. It lived here. It had always lived here. The thing above was just what it wore when it wanted to walk the earth. She crouched at the edge of the underground creek and lapped at the water. It tasted like stone, cold and pure. She waited, half expecting to hear it behind her again, but there was nothing. Only a low tremor far away, like something sighing back into sleep. She stayed until she could see light again. Dawn, maybe, the world turning. Then she climbed toward it. The house was gone when she found her way back. Where it had stood was a burned scar in the snow. The chimney still stood, blackened, leaning against the morning sky. Smoke curled from what remained of the roof. The trees nearby were silent and bare. The prints in the snow had melted away. She walked among the ashes, careful, quiet. The air smelled of wood and meat and iron. Beneath the floorboards, what was left of them, she found the woman's ring, still warm, faintly shining in the sun. She pawed at it once, then left it where it lay. She sat on the porch that wasn't a porch anymore and watched the forest. Nothing moved. The wind had gone still again. The hollow was silent, but the land smelled different now, cleaner, emptied, like the thing had gone back under the hills, full for a while. She washed her paws, stretched, and turned her head toward the mountains where the light grew. The fur along her back still stood in places where the cold had bitten deep, but her eyes caught the dawn and gleamed with something new, a reflection that wasn't the sun. When she finally walked away, she didn't look back. Somewhere deep beneath her feet, the hollow whispered. Not a voice, not words, just breath, slow and waiting. And the cat's ears twitched once before she disappeared into the trees.